My mother died, and 2 weeks later her best friend moved into our house, not to help, but as my dad's new partner. She started tossing my mom's things like they meant nothing, but I wasn't about to let them erase her. Or me. Before everything fell apart, we were just a family, not perfect but solid, me, mom, and dad in a modest house outside Madison, Wisconsin, a backyard with patchy grass and one stubborn apple tree that never grew right, and a fridge covered in magnets from trips we barely remembered anymore. I was the only kid, and my parents were older than most, had me late, but they were real partners. They argued sometimes, but you could feel they had each other's backs. Mom was loud and warm and always moving, dad quieter, more practical. He did yard work every Sunday and made the same dumb dad jokes for years, and even when school sucked or friends sucked, I always knew I could come home and be safe. That's what it felt like, safe, until mom got sick. It started slow. She was tired a lot, then more doctor visits, then hospital stays. And suddenly I was 17 and spending weekends in oncology wards pretending not to cry in bathrooms. Dad changed fast, got distant, like he didn't know how to handle seeing her like that. He showed up but not often. And he never stayed long, always had work or errands, and I didn't say anything because I thought maybe this was his way of coping. So I tried to hold things together, brought mom books and her favorite snacks, helped her get up when she could barely sit, and told her it would get better even when I knew it wouldn't. And then one day it didn't. She stopped breathing and the nurse didn't even have to say anything. I just knew. The room went cold and heavy like something had been ripped out of it, and I went home to silence. No crying, no breakdowns. Dad just signed papers and made calls like he was closing a file, and I didn't know what to do with that. At the funeral he looked like a statue, stiff, emotionless, like he was watching someone else's life. And meanwhile I was falling apart inside. Everyone came over after. The aunts with their casseroles, the uncles with awkward handshakes, people saying, "She's in a better place." Like that made it hurt less. And I remember standing in the kitchen clutching a plate I didn't eat off of and just nodding at everyone like I was on mute. Until Grandpa George came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Kiddo, no matter what happens, you ever need out, our door's open." And I just nodded again because I couldn't speak, but I held on to that. I still do. Then about a week later, things started feeling off. Small things, like Dad coming home late and locking his phone. Like a teenager, like how he stopped saying mom's name at all, or how I caught him once humming in the kitchen like nothing had changed, and I tried not to make anything of it. Told myself maybe he was trying to cope. Maybe this was how adults dealt with grief. Maybe I didn't get it. I didn't ask. I didn't accuse. But something in my gut felt wrong. I didn't know it yet. But that moment, that stupid humming in the kitchen, was the last time anything felt close to normal. Because after that, everything would fall apart in a way I couldn't even imagine. It started with the pictures. I came downstairs one morning and all the photos of mom were gone. Not moved. Gone. The frame on the mantle that had been there since I was 5. The one of the 3 of us on the Oregon coast. Gone. I opened the hall closet, the shoebox with her birthday cards and our Christmas notes. Missing. I checked the garage. Nothing. I asked him, straight up, "Where's her stuff?" And he said, "I thought it was time to tidy up a little." Tidy up, like she was clutter. I lost it. Told him he had no right to throw her out of the house she built. He said, "She's gone, honey. You need to stop living in the past." Like grief had an expiration date. Like mourning her for 7 goddamn days was dragging things out. I started locking my room, hoarding anything of hers I had left. A scarf, a mug, a receipt she wrote a note on once. And then came Lori, mom's best friend. Her best friend. The woman who cried hardest at the funeral. The woman who brought over soup every other week and held my hand in the hospital like she was family. Lori, standing at our front door on a Friday evening with a suitcase and her stupid soft voice like this was some Hallmark episode. I opened the door and just stared, didn't say a word. She said, "Hi, sweetie, can I come in?" And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Your dad and I talked, just for a little while, just until I figure things out." And I looked at him and he avoided my eyes, walked away like a coward. I told her no, flat out. I said, "You can't live here. This is still mom's house." And she gave me that sad smile, the one I'd seen her give mom when the meds stopped working. And she said, "Your dad needs support, and I'm here to help both of you." And I said, "No, you're not. You're here to replace her." And she said, "That's not fair." And I said, "Then why are you sleeping with your best friend's husband barely a month after her funeral?" And I slammed the door in her face. But it didn't matter. 2 hours later, her suitcase was in the hallway and her toothbrush was in the bathroom and she was on our couch like this was some kind of new normal. I stopped talking to both of them, ate in my room, didn't come out unless I had to. I could hear them laughing sometimes and it felt like my skin was peeling off. I tried talking to her again. Just once. Tried being civil. Said, "Why are you doing this? To me, to her memory." And she said, "Because I care about this family." And I said, "This isn't your family." And she said, "It can be, if you let it." And I laughed. I laughed so hard I almost choked. And I said, "You're not my mother, and you never will be." And she just stood there like I hit her, and I wished I had, because it was easier than screaming, easier than breaking things, easier than accepting that my own dad, the man who swore he loved my mom, was building a new life on top of her grave like she never existed. I came home from school and something felt off, like the air was heavier. I don't know how to explain it, but it was one of those things you just feel. I walked past the trash bins outside and saw a cardboard box sticking out. I looked closer and recognized it immediately. It was Mom's recipe binder, the one she always used, the one with her handwriting all over it, covered in notes and little stars next to the good one. My stomach dropped. I opened the lid and there it was, her scarf, the blue one she wore every winter, her mug with the chipped handle, the birthday card I made for her in 8th grade that she kept taped to her dresser mirror. I was shaking. I grabbed the box and stormed inside. She was in the kitchen stirring soup like nothing happened. I slammed the box on the counter. "Who told you to touch her stuff?" I asked, my voice cracking from holding back the scream. She turned like I was the one overreacting and said, "It's just clutter. I'm making space." I stared at her, heart pounding. "You don't get to decide that. None of this is yours." And she had the audacity to say, "This is my home now too," like that was supposed to make it okay, like replacing my mom gave her the right to erase her. I couldn't even respond. I took the box, went upstairs, locked my door. I didn't eat that night, didn't come out, just sat on the floor surrounded by the only things left that felt like her. And then 2 days later I came back from school and heard a chainsaw. I ran through the house and out into the yard and there was some guy cutting down our tree, the one we planted when I was 7. We dug the hole together. Mom held it steady while I poured in the water. We hung lights on it every spring and tied wishes to the branches. And now it was lying on the ground like it never mattered. I lost it. I screamed. "What the hell are you doing?" he said. "Ask the lady of the house." And I swear something inside me snapped. I ran inside and she was there on the couch scrolling through her phone. I yelled, "You cut down our tree." And she just looked at me, cold as ice, and said, "It was dying." I said, "You had no right." She stood up and said, "You need to stop acting like you own this place." And I just laughed. A bitter, broken laugh, because I realized that's exactly what she thought. That she could walk in here, clean out the closets, chop down memories, and pretend this was always her life, like my mom never existed, like I was just in the way. I told her I couldn't live in a house where my mother was being erased piece by piece. She said, "Then maybe you shouldn't." And I nodded, walked upstairs, packed 2 duffel bags, clothes, photos, her journals, the last of her perfume, and I left. Didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. I called Grandpa from the bus station and asked if I could stay with him for a while. He said yes before I could even finish the question. Said, "Whatever happens, this door is always open to you." And that was the first time in months I cried without trying to hide it, because in that moment I wasn't angry, just completely empty, like someone had scooped out everything and left a shell walking around pretending to be okay. I got off the bus with 2 bags and a shattered sense of reality. My grandfather was already waiting outside, arms crossed, face tight like he was trying to keep it together. Grandma hugged me like she was trying to press all my broken pieces back into place. She didn't ask questions right away, just kept repeating, "You're safe now," like a spell. We went home. She made tea, and I finally told them everything. Not even all the small details, just the facts. Mom was gone, and now Dad was with her best friend, who moved in, trashed her things, cut down our tree, and made it clear there was no space left for me in that house. My grandma covered her mouth, her eyes already red, and my grandpa didn't say anything, just stood up and went out onto the porch. I followed him out. He lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years, and then said, "I always knew your father was a weak man, but this..." He shook his head, his hand trembling. I asked him if I did the right thing leaving, and he said, "You did the only thing you could." That night he barely ate. Next morning I heard him on the phone with my dad. I couldn't hear everything but the tone said it all, at first calm, then louder, then yelling. I caught pieces. "You don't get to erase her, that was her home. She's your daughter, not a guest." Then a pause and I heard it, Dad's voice shouting through the line, something about living my life, and not taking orders. And then my grandpa just hung up, didn't say a word, went into his study and shut the door. For the rest of the day the house was quiet like the air was holding its breath. At dinner he finally looked at me and said, "I'm going to court." I blinked. "For what?" And he said, "To protect what your mother left behind." because if we don't do something now, there'll be nothing left of her." Grandma nodded and added, "He's not going to turn her home into a graveyard of memories he didn't want to keep." I didn't even know how court worked. I was just a kid with grief and a backpack full of her perfume and old letters, but hearing him say that made me feel, for the first time, like maybe there was a way back, maybe not to how things used to be, but to something that still had Mom's fingerprints on it. He made a few calls, found the old paperwork, started gathering whatever documents he had, said Mom's name was on the house, that he had helped buy it for her. And that gave us a leg to stand on. I didn't get all the legal stuff, but I saw the fire in his face. This wasn't just about me. It was about justice for a daughter who didn't get to finish her life, and a granddaughter who was being pushed out of it. I stayed up late that night thinking, looking around their house. Every shelf had something of hers. A picture, a gift, her old sketchbook. Nothing was shoved away or hidden. I realized then how different grief looks when it comes with love instead of guilt. And I promised myself I wouldn't go back unless it was on my own terms, not as a guest, not as an afterthought. 3 months went by like some kind of half dream, half exile. I moved into my grandparents' house and started living like a different version of myself, not fixed, not healed, just away from it all. I commuted to school from their place every day, sat at a kitchen table that didn't reek of erasure. No one tiptoed around me or pretended things were normal. They didn't ask me to smile or talk about college or move on. They just made me tea and let me sit in silence when I needed to. My grandmother kept saying, "Eat, baby," like food could fix this crack in my chest. Grandpa worked long hours, but every night he was home on time, sitting at the dining table with a stack of manila folders and his lawyer, Mr. Benton, a quiet, focused man who took this whole thing way more seriously than I expected. They went through documents page by page, never rushed me, always explained everything like I wasn't just a kid, like I had a right to know every detail of what was taken from me. And slowly, the truth started lining up in front of me, one sheet at a time. The house I grew up in wasn't entirely my dad's, not legally, not even close. Turns out my grandfather bought that house with my mom years ago, back when they thought she'd build a life there, start a family, raise a daughter, and the title had both their names, not dad's, mom's and grandpa's. And then, before she died, and this part hit the hardest, she updated her will and gave her share of the house to me, her daughter, not him, not her friend, not anyone else, me. Grandpa said Mom had talked to him about it toward the end. She told him she wasn't sure what Dad would become, but she wanted to make sure I still had something, somewhere to stand, and she'd seen how I was the only one trying to keep her memory alive, and how he was already slipping away, already cold, already somewhere else. She knew, even back then, that I might be the one who'd need protecting, and she acted on it, without saying a word to me, and the weight of that, the fact that while she was dying, she still made space for me to live. I can't explain what that felt like. Benton showed me the paperwork, all proper, notarized, sealed, and he said, "We had a strong case, that Dad was going to be in for a shock, because legally he had no full claim, not anymore, not with that will in place. And since I was underage, the rights of my share had passed to my legal guardian, which, surprise, wasn't him, not after Mom changed everything. It was Grandpa, and it had been that way for months. Dad had no idea. He'd been living in a house he didn't own, trying to control a legacy that was never his to control. Grandpa said we were going to court, that we had the upper hand, and that he was going to make sure my voice was heard, even if I was tired, even if I wanted to shut down. He wasn't going to let Dad rewrite this part of the story too. And for the first time in months I felt like I had power, not anger, not grief, but something real. I still cried at night, still talked to her out loud, but now there was direction in the pain. It had a shape, and it pointed forward, towards something that might actually feel like justice, or at least closure. Court was in 2 weeks, and Grandpa told me we were ready. I sat next to Grandpa in that courtroom and my palms were sweating but my jaw was locked, because after everything I'd been through, I wasn't scared anymore, just ready. I was finally ready to watch the truth come out in front of people who had power to do something about it. Dad showed up in a suit that didn't fit right and eyes that didn't look at mine even once, and surprise surprise, his girlfriend wasn't even there. No support, no testimony, no face to her name, just my father trying to look like the man who lost his wife and was trying to rebuild his life. He told the judge he paid the property taxes, that he took care of the place, that he deserved to stay because it was his home, and he said all this with the same flat tone he used when he kicked me out like garbage a few months ago, like none of that ever happened, like I should forget it too, like it was just a phase. And he played the role of the grieving man so well it made my stomach turn, because he wasn't grieving, he was just pissed that his plan didn't work. The plan where he slowly erased Mom and rewrote her space with someone else's perfume, someone else's voice, someone who called our kitchen cozy, like she'd always belonged there, and the judge listened, nodded, kept a straight face, but when it was our turn, our lawyer was ready, Grandpa was calm, and I just sat there watching all of it get peeled back, the title and Grandpa's name, the joint deed with Mom, and most of all, the will, signed and notarized, the one my mother made when she was preparing for the worst, the one that said her share of the home, her only real possession, would go to me, her daughter, and when the judge read it, I didn't blink, I just clenched my fists under the table, and then the judge asked it, simple and cold, do you or do you not own a second property at 137 Grafton Street? And Dad hesitated like he thought lying might help, but he nodded, said something about how it was old and barely livable and not a solution, but the judge didn't care about his excuses, it's a functional residence, correct? Plumbing, power, no liens, and again, he nodded, and that was it. The moment I'd been holding my breath for, the judge looked at him and said, then you have somewhere to go, because this house does not belong to you, not by paper, not by intention, and not by legal inheritance. And the silence after that was sharp and final, no room for pity, no room for him to play victim. The judge gave him 14 days to vacate the premises, and that was it, just like that, no appeal, no extension, just the truth hitting him like a wall. And I swear for the first time I saw a real panic on his face, the kind that can't be hidden behind smugness or fake dignity. And I didn't look at him, not when we stood, not when we walked out, not even when I heard his voice call my name like it suddenly meant something again. Grandpa just placed his hand on my back and said, you did good. And I didn't cry, didn't gloat, didn't feel guilty. Because this wasn't revenge, this was protection, this was taking back what was mine and what was hers and what he tried to erase. And when we stepped outside and the cold air hit me, it didn't hurt. It felt like the first breath I'd taken in months. The day we got the keys back, Grandpa handed them to me without a word, just nodded like he knew I needed to do it myself. And when I opened the front door, the house felt smaller than I remembered, like it had been holding its breath the whole time we were gone. Everything looked cleaner but wrong, like it had been wiped of memory and smell. No more flowers in the hallway, no more shoes by the door, no photos, no color, just beige survival. And for a second I stood there, quiet, not crying, just scanning everything like I was seeing the aftermath of a break-in, only the thief was my own father. I started unpacking the boxes I'd kept safe at Grandpa's, and one by one, Mom came home. Her books went back on the shelves, her jacket back on the hook, the quilt she made back on the couch, the framed photo of us at the lake, the last real smile she ever had, back on the mantle. And it didn't fix anything. It didn't bring her back, but it stopped the erasure, and that meant something. I sealed her bedroom and left it alone, not because I couldn't face it, but because it deserved to rest, and slowly, painfully, the house became mine, not because I wanted it, but because I had to make it safe again. And weeks went by and I got used to the quiet, to cooking alone, doing laundry, locking up at night. It wasn't happy, but it was honest, and I was okay with that. Rachel came by often, Grandpa too. But mostly it was just me, rebuilding the space that had been taken. And then one Thursday night around 7 p.m. there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I looked through the peephole, my whole body went cold. It was Dad, standing there alone, holding nothing, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I didn't open the door right away. I just stared at him until he knocked again, softer this time, and said my name. So I opened it halfway and didn't say anything, just waited. He didn't look at me at first, just stared at his feet, then looked up and his eyes were red and wet and tired, and the first thing he said was, she left, and I said nothing. He wiped his nose and added, she said it was too much for her, the house, the bills, everything, and I still said nothing, and then his voice cracked and he said, I made a mistake, and for the first time, he looked scared, like he had nowhere left to go, no one left to lie to, and then he started crying, not loud, just quietly, the kind that makes you feel sick watching it, and he said, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was moving on, but I was just trying to forget, and I had no right. I didn't just lose your mother, I lost you, and I stood there frozen, because I wanted to scream, to ask where this version of him was months ago, when I was begging not to be thrown out, when he picked her over me, when he took the tree, the photos, the air out of this place and replaced it with silence and shame. But I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't hug him, I just said, I don't know what you want from me, and he said, nothing. I just had to say it, and I nodded and said, okay, and closed the door. I thought that was it, that he would walk away like he always did, but 2 minutes later, another knock, softer, slower, like he knew he was pushing it, and when I opened the door just a crack, he was still there, hands shaking, voice low, "Can I come in, please, just for a second?" And I didn't say yes, just stepped aside because I needed to end it properly. He sat on the edge of the couch like a guest in his own life, and I stayed standing, arms crossed, watching him squirm, and finally I said, "Why now?" And he said, "Because everything fell apart and I realized how badly I broke this, how much I hurt you." And I cut him off, calm, flat, "No, you didn't hurt me, you erased me." And he looked up, shocked, like he didn't expect me to say it out loud, but I didn't stop. I told him everything I'd held in, that I watched him clear her face off the walls like she was some mistake, that I saw him let someone else dig their hands into our life before I could even grieve, that he made me feel like I was the one in the way, like I was the problem for wanting to remember her. And he just sat there, mouth open, eyes red, and I said, "You didn't lose your house, you lost me." And it landed. I saw it hit him like a punch. He looked around the room, like maybe he thought the walls would defend him, but they didn't. They were mine now. And then I pointed to the door, no yelling, no tears, just a hand and a stare, and he got up slowly and left, didn't fight it, didn't ask for more, just walked out like he finally understood what being gone really meant. And when the door closed behind him, something shifted, not like relief, more like recognition, that I wasn't empty, that I wasn't alone in this house, that somehow she was still here, in the way I stood up for myself, in the way I didn't bend, in the way I kept the lights on. Her strength moved through me, and I knew right then, she never really left, not the parts of her that mattered. And now I'm 27, I live in a different city with my husband and 2 kids, the house is long sold, but I kept a box of her books, her scarf, the photo from the lake, and every time I feel like I'm about to fall apart, I look at that box and I remember how far I came. My dad and I made peace 2 years ago, not a deep one, just enough to say happy birthday and mean it. He built a new life and I don't hate him for it, but I don't owe him anything either. We exist, and that's enough. I didn't get closure, I got control, and I think that's better. I don't need to explain my pain to anyone. I lived it, survived it, and now I've built something he never could, a family that never has to choose between love and memory.